Story 1. There are several that come to mind. I went on one where she was texting with her ex the whole time. Paid. No second date. I went on a date with another woman who was more interested in Facebook than me. If they reach for their phone more than twice without good cause, I'm gone. I will no longer inconvenience myself. Story 2. We met online and spent a few days texting. The conversation went well, so we decided to get drinks and guacamole at a local spot that week. The conversation flowed well in real life too. Similar careers, decent overlap in interests, and a complementary sense of humor. The date ends and she invites me back to her place. I go and we wind up on the couch to watch a movie. Well, she almost instantly passed out and I didn't know what to do. Luckily, it was partway through the movie, so I let her sleep a bit and finished watching the movie. The movie ends, and I figured that the shift in noise might wake her up a bit. Nope, she's out like a light, so I figure it's time to head home and think that maybe the next date will go better. I wake her up, and she's in complete shock, like she forgot I was there at all. I tried to make a joke about her falling asleep, something to let her know I wasn't annoyed by it and thought it was funny, but that fell flat. Her entire mood and demeanor from earlier did a complete reversal, and she acted as if she had just had the worst date and couldn't get rid of me fast enough. I texted her for another day or two because I genuinely didn't understand when the switch flipped and had enjoyed our happy hour together. By the second day, I picked up on her tone and left well enough alone. To this day, I have no idea what happened for her to change so drastically, but it is what it is. Not the worst date ever, but definitely one of the stranger ones. Story 3. Met a girl at a club. Invited her out for dinner for next week and then go to the club and see what happens. At the date, she was late. I started talking with the waiter who also went to the same club. About 30 minutes late, she arrived full of apologies. The date went okay, but she was nervous. I blamed it on a first date until the police arrived. Apparently, she was shoplifting at a shop next door, and the camera images showed where she went. Fortunately, the waiter helped me avoid getting arrested. Story 4. We were at a Mexican restaurant. Half an hour or so in, she invited her roommate to the meal. She showed up, and the two of them talked nonstop to just each other, then asked me to pick up the check for the three of us. Story 5. This didn't happen during the date, but after our one and only date. This happened almost 15 years ago. I was working abroad at the time, and I met an incredibly aesthetically pleasing lady at a coffee shop and absolutely had to chat her up. We exchanged numbers and went out for drinks later that week. While the date went off all right, I felt like something wasn't quite right, so I told her at the end of the night that I had a great time, but I didn't think we had much in common. She seemed okay with this fact, thanked me for my honesty, and we parted ways with a hug. A couple of days later, I received a text as I was leaving the office from her asking if I could meet up because she needed to talk to someone. I'm not going to be a jerk and say no, especially since she sounded desperate, so I told her to meet me at the coffee shop where we first met. She showed up with a suitcase, looking incredibly disheveled and obviously having recently cried. We sat down to start talking, and she started telling me how she was in a bad place, got involved with a lot of hard drugs, was turning tricks on the street to fund said drugs, and just got kicked out by her mom. While I'm trying to absorb the deluge and not choke on my coffee, she asked if she could stay with me. Nope. I told her I wasn't comfortable with the idea since we didn't know each other and asked if she had anyone else to turn to, which led to more crying. We were starting to cause a scene, so I then offered to get a room for her at one of the local hotels using my travel points, but she didn't have to know so that she could at least have a place for the night while she sorted things out. She accepted on the condition that I at least stay a while with her for comfort. We check in, head to the room, and sit down to start talking some more. I then realized that it was relatively late and I had to get up early for work, so I made these facts known. She broke down some more, which left me conflicted to the point that I reluctantly stayed and told myself that I had a pretty good excuse for my boss in the morning. A few more hours later, I really needed to get to sleep, so I told her that I'm just going to sleep in the one bed, so I could get some rest before my day starts and she could have the other bed to herself. She went to start getting ready for bed and I fell fast asleep. I woke up roughly 30 minutes later, probably around 4 in the morning, incredibly groggy, But something was definitely not right. I'm still trying to focus because I slept in my contacts, so my eyes are taking a minute to adjust. There's an arm draped around me. Why do I feel wet and sticky? Then I notice all the red. She had cut herself and crawled into bed with me. Instant panic mode. It took everything I had to swallow my heart a couple of times as it desperately attempted to escape. I called down to the front desk asking where the nearest hospital was. No time to explain. I'll pay for the room, etc. I don't remember carrying her out to the car, wrapped in the drenched bedsheets, nor do I remember the drive to the hospital. I only remember carrying her through the front door and yelling for help. The staff rushed over and took her away, and I was immediately sat with two officers and a nurse or doctor who started asking me a lot of questions. I answered as honestly as I could but noticed my peripheral was starting to turn black. Then fainted. I eventually came to, and so did the girl. Thankfully, she corroborated my side of the story and that there was no foul play. I don't want to know what would have happened otherwise considering I was a foreign national on a work visa. I've avoided talking to girls in coffee shops since. Edit. Emphasis on the messed up part. Later I found out she was a cutter and had cuts up and down her thighs, as well as her arms. She had taken some sleeping pills and started cutting herself. Then the pills took effect and she just laid down next to me. She didn't slit her wrists, but that's not something I was looking for at the time while desperately trying to figure out if she was breathing. She was, of course. Given her comatose state from the pills, I thought the worst when I couldn't get her conscious. Story 6. I took her to the driving range to teach her how to drive a golf ball. While showing her how to swing, I hit her in the head on the backswing, not with full force. Cut her head open, and she was bleeding all over the place. I took her to the emergency room to get stitches. We went out to a bar afterward. She is now my wife of over 15 years. It was a bad date but memorable. Story 7. I drove 40 minutes to meet her at a Chinese buffet. She was 15 to 20 minutes late. She walks in and I stand up from the table as you do to greet someone at meals. She immediately flops into the booth and starts talking about her day and stuff. Awesome, no awkwardness. Except she is incredibly loud. Not like she's yelling, but she has just a loud carrying voice and everyone seems to notice as well. After we ordered, she immediately starts talking about her It Works multi-level marketing. Tuned the rest of the date out and ate my body weight in sushi. Never talked to her again, and I could not tell you her name for the life of me. Thanks, Tinder. Story 8. This wasn't a date, but we were both single at the time and trying to feel each other out. She showed up 20 minutes late and was completely intoxicated. She began to talk a little bit and then revealed she had an unplanned pregnancy that ended in a miscarriage, still missed her ex who she broke up with 6 months ago, was drinking all the time, had a lot of encounters with guys at a nightclub, and also spent a lot of money on marijuana. I then ordered a pizza and she criticized me because she had a tomato allergy that was unknown to me at the time and was upset she couldn't eat it. This all occurred in roughly 15 minutes. Story 9. She invited me to dinner. When I picked her up and went in to greet her mom, they had a 45-minute fight in front of me, and I was too mortified to leave. It culminated with them arguing about why anyone, including that boy on the couch, would want to take the girl out to dinner, and then they literally asked me and expected answers. Story 10. Tinder date. We agreed to meet at a salsa bar for a drink and dancing. She shows up. She's surprised I'm French. That's literally the first thing in my Tinder bio. We talk a bit. It doesn't seem to go bad. We go on the dance floor. Terrible dancing chemistry. I'm not a great dancer at all, but it was like she was always moving in the opposite direction of where I was trying to lead. After about 1 minute of that, she excused herself to the bathroom and left me right there on the dance floor. I sat down at a table, and she came back, sitting down looking away from me. I offered her to try again. She made an excuse about being tired and working tomorrow and left. I stopped even trying to dance since then. Story 11. Asked out my former next-door neighbor. Went out to a nice bar and grill for drinks and dinner. She would not stop talking about the time she took LSD at a concert and was vomiting spiders. Then she figured out I was 2 years younger and said, "Ew, it's like I'm dating my brother." Then left. Bullet dodged. Story 12. Okay, this is great. I met up with a girl online from Thailand who was coming over to study at my college. She had just recently arrived, and I met up with her, wanting to take her to a funny movie. So, like an idiot, I took her to Sausage Party. I was dying with laughter at the movie theater the entire time, and she didn't laugh once. She told me afterward that she didn't understand the jokes or half of what they were saying. It was super uncomfortable during the scene at the end, and my soul literally descended from my body to get away. Story 13. She wanted to go to a park and walk on some trails. She swore she knew her way around the park until suddenly it was getting dark, and we were lost with no cell phone service. We eventually found our way out, but not before 30 minutes of walking around in the woods in a slight panic. Story 14. Long story ahead. So scroll down to the summary if you don't want to waste your time. A Tinder date from when I was 18 and just started using the app. It was my first date from the app. I'm from a somewhat rural area, and she was from the city. We exchanged a couple of texts, and she called me to say we should meet at an International House of Pancakes in the city. I arrived at the International House of Pancakes, and she was chain-smoking cigarettes on the back of her 2006 Corvette, like it was straight out of a movie cliché. After she smoked about 3, we went inside. We hit it off really well and planned on going back to her apartment to relax. Here's where things went wrong. She asked me, "Are you a coward? Or do you like to have fun?" Obviously, me being a naive 18-year-old, I said, "Of course I'm not." She then suggested we go to a strip club. 5 minutes of debating later, I was somehow in her car that was filled to the brim with clothes. We met up in a big city, so I assumed she was going to take me to one of the 100 clubs in the city. Nope. She drove 35 minutes outside the city to a sketchy club that's bring your own beverage and most known for sketchy drug deals turned into murders. At this point, I was thinking, what did I get myself into? But at least I'll get lucky. We got there, and immediately she removed our under 21 wristbands and said she knew the owner. The owner came over, started talking up a storm, then gave us a free bottle because, I guess, she comes here a lot. About 4 bottles later, a lap dance from her, and a pack of cigarettes, she leaned over and said, "I'm too tired to drive back to my apartment. My friend is going to come get me." At this point, I was upset, in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m., and close to being drunk. I managed to call a ride service and finally got back to my car at the International House of Pancakes at 4 a.m. 3 years later, it's still the craziest Tinder date I've been on in the 20 to 30 dates I've had. Summary. Crazy Tinder date took me to a strip club in the middle of nowhere, then abandoned me after we were supposed to go back to her place. Story 15. I was talking to a girl who kept going back and forth on when she was available to go out, so we ended up having a spontaneous meetup. She was unable to muster any real kind of conversation. I did my absolute hardest to ask questions and prompt any type of response, but I mostly got yes or no for a reply. She also had no table manners and was chewing with her mouth open the whole time. It was pretty distracting. We tried walking around, and she ended up buying an umbrella from a shop, but I had just lost all interest and knew it was going to go nowhere. I found an opening and excused myself because I couldn't handle walking around and talking about nothing for a moment longer. Story 16. When I was in college, a girl I was not interested in asked if I wanted to watch a movie with her. I said no, but then she said that a number of other friends would also be coming, so I changed my no to a yes. When I got there, only she showed up to the theater. I watched the movie because it was The Dark Knight and she paid for it. Story 17. The worst for me was a date arranged by a friend. She talked about how great of an athlete she was, how many degrees she had, the great job she had, and the politicians she knew. At the time, I was working in retail but making steps towards improving myself by restarting education and getting back into shape. I admit that I didn't have a lot going for me at the time, but she stood me up for the second date. Fast forward 3 years and her job had disappeared. She gained a ton of weight, probably from the kid she had, and was working as a waitress. She claimed she never stood me up. Story 18. Got asked out by this girl from a class in university. Never spoke to her before, but she was cute, so I thought, why not? Went out on the date, and I had less chemistry with her than literally anyone else I've ever met. Couldn't get any conversation going whatsoever. Both of us put in extreme effort to talk about mundane subjects that neither of us cared about. Here's the thing, though, she was desperately lonely and didn't want the date to end. So the conversations became even more painful, awkward, and stilted. At one point, there was a literal 5-minute lull in the conversation, only for her to break it with, "What's your favorite color?" I left shortly thereafter,